Welcome to my channel, Charlie Aylmer. Daylenn Moke Pua on February 27th, 2015, 18-year-old Daylenn Pua went out hiking up the Haiku Stairs on the island of Oahu, Hawaii. He was never seen again. Also called the Stairway to Heaven, the Haiku Stairs were originally built in 1942 on Oahu by the U.S. Navy, and they sit atop the Keo'olahu mountain range. The structure leads to a radio tower designed to broadcast across the entire Pacific Ocean. The stairs were closed in 1987, and they are technically off limits to casual hikers, but many ignore this and go up them anyway, and check up all 3,922 steps. Pua was one of these adventurous souls. He was last seen in Waiwani, Oahu, at a bus station headed for the stairs. Once he reached the Haiku Stairs, he posted several pictures on social media, and one picture was up the stairs themselves, indicating he was on the trail at around 11:11, and this would be the last time he was heard from. When Pua didn't arrive home that day, his family reported him missing. A massive search was launched, comprising of the fire department, local volunteers, drone operators, and the U.S. Navy, but they failed to find any sign of him. Two witnesses later came forward, claiming to have heard a man shout out for help on the first day he went missing. At first it was thought that Pua had simply slipped and fallen over one of the many heroin cliffs of the area, but a closer look at one of the photos posted by him revealed that something sinister may have happened to him. The photo in question seems to be a shot of Oahu's dense forest, but if you look more closely, you can see something strange lurking just below the trees. Closer inspection shows what appears to be a man crouched down in the bushes, as if hiding. Since this was one of the last photos Pua took, many believe that this is the image of a man who is following Pua and potentially abducted or killed him, while others believe Pua simply got lost and perished in the area. Pua remains missing to this day, and the man in the photo has not been identified. The Grim Sleeper's mysterious photos. One of the most prolific serial killers in California's history, nicknamed the Grim Sleeper, who preyed on mostly African-American women in the Los Angeles area, is thought to have murdered at least 11 people, and quite possibly more from the 1980s to 2007. The killer would eventually be found to be Lonnie David Franklin Jr. His victims were all women, and one was only 15 years old. He killed 8 women between 1985 and 1980. And then didn't begin killing again until 2002. That long break is what earned him the nickname, the Grim Sleeper, because he slept between committing his grim crimes. Many of his victims were sex workers. One witness recalls that Franklin frequently brought prostitutes into his home. He shot all of his victims with a .25 caliber gun, and almost all of them came from similar neighborhoods, mostly black communities with poor families. In 1988, one of Franklin's victims got away alive and was instrumental in the court case against him. Nearly 20 years later, in Rita, Washington, then a 30-year-old mother of 2 was walking to her friend's house when a stranger pulled up next to her and politely offered her a ride in his orange Pinto. She gratefully accepted the ride. However, he drove her in the opposite direction of where she'd wanted to go. He told her that he needed to make a quick stop at his uncle's house to pick up money. They ended up on a side street where he allegedly parked at a house near an apartment building and an auto shop. He allegedly got out, walked up to the house briefly, talked to someone at the front door, and returned about 10 minutes later. He then drove her down a back alley where he shot her and then sexually assaulted her. After the attack, he started the Pinto again and then pushed Washington out of the car, where she picked herself up off the street and stumbled many blocks to the house of a friend who called an ambulance. She survived the ordeal and was able to give a description of her attacker. But it wouldn't be until 2010 when Franklin was finally caught. through familial DNA testing. After his 28-year-old son, Christopher was convicted of a weapons charge in the summer of 2009 and had to give a DNA swab. Once it was determined that Christopher was related to the alleged killer, detectives followed Franklin to a pizza place in Buna Park as Franklin finished his meal. A detective who posed as a busboy collected a fork, a plastic cup, a plate, and a pizza slice left by Franklin. A few days later, DNA taken from the pizza slice came back as a match to DNA found on the alleged Grim Sleeper's victims. When authorities searched Lonnie David Franklin Gyre's home after his arrest, they found 180 Polaroid photos hidden behind a wall in the garage. The photos were of women of all ages, ranging from teenage girls to young women, to others in their 60s, mostly fully or partially nude, and in various states of dress, with many of them beaten, unconscious, or seemingly sleeping. Perhaps dead, some of the pictured women were identified and were still alive and claimed the Grim Sleeper picked them up off the street and asked them to pose for photos. To this day, not everybody in the pictures has been identified, leaving police to believe he may have killed far more women than the 11 initially attributed to him. There are about 38 people in the photos that have yet to be identified. The police have compiled these photos and put together a slideshow of the unidentified individuals in an effort to find out whether they are alive or if there are more victims. If you recognize any of the women in the picture, or if you want to look at the pictures more closely, in August of 2016, Franklin received the death penalty for 11 murders he conducted between the years of 1985 and 2007. Several of the victims' relatives confronted him in court, but he still denied that he was the killer. He is now on California's death row for the murders of Deborah Jackson, Henrietta Wright, Barbara Ware, Thomas Steele, Bernita Sparks, Mary Lowe, Patricia Jefferson, Alicia Alexander Princess, Bartholomew, Valerie McCorvey, and Jenica Peters. Authorities are trying to connect him with at least 15 other deaths. Karen and Michael Reinert. Karen and Michael Reinert lived with their divorced mother, Susan Gallagher Reinert, in Edmore, Pennsylvania. Susan worked as a teacher in Upper Merion High School. On the evening of June 22, 1979, neighbors saw Susan and the children hurried to her car after receiving a phone call. Around 9:20 p.m., this would be the last time Susan was seen alive, and the children have never been seen again. 3 days later at 5:20 a.m. on June 25th, Susan's nude body was found in the trunk of her own car, which was parked in the parking lot of the Host Inn in Sawarda Township, Pennsylvania. A Spanish-sounding voice called police to report a woman was sick in her car in the inn's parking lot, which led to the discovery of Susan's remains. She had been beaten viciously, stripped naked, chained, and may have been dragged a short distance. She was kept alive for 24 to 36 hours, finally being killed with an injection of morphine. There was no sign of Michael or Karen at the scene, and an extensive search turned up no signs of either of them. Within weeks, police learned that on the day Susan, Michael, and Karen vanished, they were planning on meeting Susan's boyfriend. William Bradfield was the head of the English department at Upper Merion High School, where Susan also worked. Susan and Bradfield had begun their relationship in 1974 while Susan was still married to Michael and Karen's father in March 1979, 3 months before she and her children disappeared. She told friends Bradfield was going to marry her. Susan had named Bradfield as the beneficiary of her life insurance policies, worth $730,000, and she had changed her will to make Bradfield the sole heir to her estate, to the exclusion of her children. Susan did not know that Bradfield was also dating at least 3 other women. There was also the $25,000 inheritance she received that appeared to have ended up in Bradfield's possession. It is believed that Bradfield had murdered Susan and her children for Susan's life insurance, money, and inheritance. In 1983, Bradfield was arrested in charge with conspiring to murder Susan, Karen, and Michael, but Bradfield had an alibi. He was at the beach in Cape May, New Jersey the weekend Reinert was killed, and her children disappeared. Several teachers were with him and could vouch for his whereabouts. Then, the focus shifted to the school where they all taught, Upper Marion High School. The principal, Dr. J. Charles Smith, at the time of Susan's death, was already in prison, serving a 5-year sentence for unrelated convictions of drug possession with intent to deliver and receiving stolen goods. Dr. Smith's daughter and her husband, Stephanie Huntsberger and Edward Huntsberger, both disappeared in 1978. The last confirmed sighting of them was on February 25, 1978. There were several reported sightings of the couple after this date, but none of them were verified. It was believed that Smith had a hand in their disappearance. However, there was no solid evidence to connect them to their disappearances, and it's unclear what happened. To the Huntsbergers, authorities believed Dr. Smith had committed the actual killings and Bradfield had orchestrated it. Dr. Smith had a date in court. On the morning Reinert's body turned up, he was late for his sentencing in Harrisburg, not far from the hotel parking lot, where police were removing Susan's body from her car. Also found in Susan's car were a sex toy and a plastic comb bearing the name of Smith's Army Reserve Unit. Dr. Smith was eventually convicted of 3 counts of murder and sentenced to death, while Bradford was convicted of planning the murder and given 3 life sentences in prison. However, Dr. Smith was released when his conviction was overturned in 1989 because of allegedly concealed evidence by the prosecution. A retrial was ordered but never conducted. Smith was freed from prison in 1992. In 1998, Bradfield died while in custody. He never admitted to involvement in Susan's murder or Karen and Michael's disappearances. After Bradfield's death, authorities found a photograph among dozens of boxes of Bradfield's belongings. The belongings also included some writings that appear to be in code. The photograph, which police say was developed in 1986, depicts a stone marker that resembles the shape of a hooded figure. The stone is surrounded by fallen leaves, with woods in the background. Police believe the children's remains may be buried there. Although dozens of tips came in when the photo was released a decade ago, investigators have been unable to locate this marker. Karen and Michael remain missing to this day. On February 13, 2017, best friends Abigail Williams, 13, and Liberty German, 14, planned to go hiking near the beautiful area of Monon High Bridge Trail, east of their small town of Delphi, Indiana. A day before, Abigail had had a sleepover at Liberty's home, who was in the primary care of her grandparents, Mike and Becky Patty, since school had been closed. On the Monday of February 13th, the 2 friends had asked Liberty's grandma if they could go hiking. The girls were granted permission under the condition that they secured a ride to get there and back. Liberty's older sister, Kelsey German, dropped the 2 off on her way to work at 1:30 p.m. and the girls arranged to be picked up by Liberty's father, Derek German, after running several errands that would take 2 hours. At 2:07 p.m., Liberty decided to record their adventure. They took some photos and uploaded a picture of Abigail smiling on Snapchat as she crossed the abandoned Monon High Bridge. At 3:11 p.m., Derek texted Liberty to let them know to start heading back to their meeting point to pick them up upon arrival at 3:14. The girls were nowhere to be found. He proceeded to text and call Liberty numerous times, but received no reply. Derek, now worried, and decided to walk the trail to search for the girls. 15 minutes later, without any luck, he called Liberty's grandma Becky, letting her know that the girls were missing. The family then searched for the girls on the trail for about an hour but found no trace of them. As it was starting to become dark outside, the family officially reported the girls missing to the police. Shortly after 5 p.m., by 6 p.m., a massive search was launched. Authorities and over 100 local residents searched the trail that night. The following day, on February 14th, at around 12 p.m., a volunteer searcher stumbled upon the bodies of Abigail and Liberty. near Deer Creek, about half a mile away from the bridge. They were last pictured on. Authorities have not released how the girls have been murdered, and whether or not they have been sexually assaulted is unknown, but they did release 2 compelling images of a prime suspect whom they believe may have been the person responsible for the girls' murder. The picture released to the public had been captured by Liberty German as she was recording Abigail during the hike. The suspect in the picture appeared to be a middle-aged Caucasian male wearing a blue windbreaker or coat, denim blue jeans, a brown hat, brown shoes or boots, and a brown undergarment. That may be clothing or a fanny pack. 3 days later, on February 22nd, 2017, another clue was made public when the police unveiled a 3-second audio of a male saying, "Down the hill," that was recorded from Liberty's phone.
Down the hill. Down the hill.
Authorities stated that the audio recording started off as normal, girl stuff talking and laughing, but when they saw the man on the bridge, the audio captured the girls becoming nervous and worried. It's believed that the girls likely saw the man when they entered the trail and then forgot about him by the time they walked on the bridge. When the man reappeared again on the bridge, the girls may have sensed an impending danger. At one point, Liberty may have decided to take the picture of the suspect and conceal her phone at her side in her successful attempt to capture the suspect on tape. By the time the suspect approached them, Liberty likely had put the phone in her pocket. It is believed the suspect was unaware of the presence of the phone as it was recovered at the crime scene. Along with the bodies, a hill lies next to the bridge, which is likely what the suspect is referring to. In the audio tape, when he says, "Down the hill," the bodies were found across a very shallow creek that flows at the bottom of the hill. It is unclear, but theorized that given the very shallow water, they simply crossed over the creek and were promptly murdered. Other theories include that the girls had already been murdered and had been dragged or carried across the creek. In July of 2017, a witness came forward and reported that they saw the suspect in the area around the time the girls had been murdered. A composite sketch was released, and police stated that the suspect had reddish brown hair, stands between 5'6" and 5'10", and weighs between 180 and 220 pounds. The witness is uncertain of the suspect's exact eye color, but is confident that they were not blue. In September of 2017, a possible suspect was identified with the arrest of Daniel J. Nations at a traffic stop in Colorado. Nations is a registered sex offender in Indiana and was driving a car with expired Indiana license plates. At the time of his arrest, Nations was arrested in Woodland Park for threatening people with a hatchet on a monument hiking trail. A bicyclist was also fatally shot on the trail around the same time that Nations was allegedly threatening people. In Nations' car, a red Chevy Prism, there was a hatchet and a .22 caliber rifle. Nations has had a lengthy criminal record, including petty offenses such as domestic violence, drug possession, driving with a suspended license, failure to appear in court, and pleasuring himself in a woman's restroom in a Rikers gas station. Although he was a person of interest in the case, police believed he was probably not the killer, as on February 14, 2017, the day after the girls were murdered, as a registered homeless sex offender, Nations was present for his weekly checkup with authorities and had been consistently attending in the time prior. Daniel Nations was sentenced to 3 years probation on January 5, 2018 for the charge of threatening hikers in Colorado, and in February of 2018, the Indiana State Police announced he was no longer a person of interest in the Delphi murders. The murder of Abigail and Liberty remains unsolved, and the person in the photograph is yet to be identified.